welcome to Southeast Asia Speaks. I'm Marites Vitug, and joining us is Gwen Robinson, editor-at-large of Nikkei Asia. She's based in Bangkok. She's also senior fellow at the Institute of Security and International Studies of Chulalongkorn University. And of course, she's also president of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. Southeast Asia Speaks is a new interview show which I host, wherein I speak to various newsmakers and personalities about current affairs in Southeast Asia. Welcome to Southeast Asia Speaks, Gwen, and thank you so much for making time. I know you're quite busy following Myanmar and answering all these questions in webinars and interviews.
Thanks, Marites.
So it's been 1 month since the coup, February 1. Yeah. And the protests are not stopping. 18 have been killed so far. So what is your sense of this when you said this in another webinar that this is a dangerous phase and Myanmar is imploding? Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. Actually, also on this this question of death toll and the damage so far, I do strongly believe that that's a very conservative number from what we saw at the weekend. Extraordinary violence, including military units, not police, using live ammunition and firing direct into the crowd, not even over their heads. And the sort of injuries I saw would indicate, I think, a far higher death toll, but also scores and scores, if not hundreds, injured. So far, we don't have the actual numbers, but I think it is extremely serious, and it was the most intense violence we've seen since the beginning of the coup on February 1 at dawn. So why did I say a dangerous phase? I think I said I think it's a dangerous new phase, and it really seems clear to me that on February 1st, when the military announced it had taken over because of its concerns about, quote, serious fraud in the elections last November, I think they genuinely believed that they might be able to fool or convince the population eventually to go ahead or go along with it. I think they also thought there might be a bit of protest and pushback, so they had some troops ready. We've had, I think in subsequent investigations, it does seem like some of the military units had been moving in from far-flung areas over, well, really through December and January. It would indicate that the military did expect some pushback. But what I don't think they really expected was the extraordinary level of protest that we've seen in the last month, which is not only not letting up, but getting bigger. And the other thing they really didn't expect, I think, is this mass boycott, which has so far, I think, conservatively probably seen maybe 2/3 of civil servants walk off their jobs. I think the New York Times the other day estimated 75% out of 1 million civil servants. And that means everything from garbage collection in the local neighborhood to serious, medical services. Hospitals that are struggling anyway to deal with COVID have lost medical staff. We're talking about transport, tax collection, power plants. I mean, the whole system is imploding because of the wholesale boycott by a lot of civil servants. So that I think has triggered increasing frustration on the part of the military, and I think led to this display of extreme violence on Saturday and Sunday. And I think really what the signal was that the military has now decided to eliminate protest. They were putting up with it. They were hoping they could win people over, although these guys have no concept of winning hearts and minds, I think, because all we've seen is a rollout of increasingly draconian legislation and proposals. So I'd say that this is a dangerous new phase also because you'll see a lot more ruthlessness now they were relatively restrained in the first month, but now it's shooting, it's rounding people up. In one weekend alone, they even announced on state TV that more than 500 people had been rounded up that weekend and taken to jail. That is about the total, well, no, not quite the total, but it's nearly as much as has been arrested for the first month. So I think they're really stepping up arrests, violence, intimidation, and beyond that is their agenda to force people to go back to work. But as we all know, you really can't force people to go back to work.
But do you think, how long do you think can the protest movement last?
Well,
because they're 85 or 75% of the civil servants are supposedly not working in their offices, like banks, hospitals, as you said earlier. So they're not earning their salaries, not paid. I wonder how long this will go on.
Yeah, this is a very big question, and it's an absolutely crucial question when we're talking about how long can this protest movement last. It's about money, it's about, you know, general support services. How long can you last without, say, electricity, or without, you know, without sewage, without fundamental support services, and most of all, food. At the moment, we've seen incredible outpourings of assistance. This coup has united Myanmar in a way that nothing else has been able to do, I think. No other, I can't remember when this country was so united in its opposition. Of course, we can't forget that there's, you know, the military is one of the largest standing armies in the world proportionately, and estimated, they claim 500,000, but I think the estimates are closer to 300,000 or 250,000. But that still makes, if you think about it, each military member has maybe at least 10 family. And so if you multiply that, you can't discount that there is actually a small hardcore in Myanmar that does support the military and can live with violence, as long as, I suppose, they're not threatened. So that leads to the question about how long can they last. I think it's becoming very clear that there are some very big support networks behind the civil disobedience movement. There's a lot of organizations abroad, or individual wealthy Burmese who are working around the clock, I think, to get support to the movement, to working on the diplomatic front as well. But I think there's ways and means that funding and support is getting to this group. And you can see yourself when we see footage on the streets that every day it gets a little more sophisticated. People now have hard hats. They've got endless posters in full color of, you know, demanding a return to democracy, many with Aung San Suu Kyi's face. This all costs money, and it is coming from somewhere. How long could it last? It's a difficult question. You know, we've seen incredible resilience on the part of resistance movements worldwide in every country. You look also at the Philippines and how long people fought for and suffered for their cause. So my sense is, I don't think it's going to be over quickly. I think people could hold out for months, and it all depends. Obviously, there's a lot at stake and a lot of other things happening at the same time as what's on the ground, and very brave people facing up to troops in the street. But there's a lot going on in diplomatic circles. And I think that's what's giving the movement most hope of all, is that they've got to keep going. And the sense that this is a window right now before everything has been locked off, before everyone has been arrested or shot, there is a chance for them, and they have to take that.
You mentioned earlier, Gwen, about some from the police force defecting and joining the protest movement. Is this, do you think this will become, this will spread, or is it just limited to one area?
Well, no, it's not limited to one area, but it's very scarce and sporadic and erratic. But we saw some stunning footage, I think, in the last month of even a whole little police unit, a local police unit in a province, turning and suddenly doing three-finger salutes and announcing they were joining the CDM, the protest movement. And just this weekend, I think the most senior officer so far to cross the line and join the movement was a police major who put out a video, extremely brave, explaining his reasons and why he was doing this. And he said, they might put me in jail, but I don't care. I have to do the right thing. And he called on his fellow officers to follow suit. I think that sort of thing might have some impact on some police and military who might be wavering, but there's a very, very big difference between police and military. And so far, all I've seen are police. And at that, I would guess that at this point, it might be, we'd be lucky to think maybe it's about 60 police of varying ranks who might have gone across. Of course, there might be a lot of silent things going on. There might be a lot of police who just can't stomach the idea of having to go in the street and shoot children, you know. This could actually reflect in a steady demoralization, I think, of the police. The military is another animal altogether. They're very, very, I could talk for a day about the Myanmar military, but I think they're really developed and trained as both fighting machines and also specifically not to become very attached or comfortable in their areas. They're moved around a lot. They're sent in. And we saw the shocking atrocities against the Rohingya Muslims in 2017 and early 2016, which were just unspeakable. And this was done by mainly military units and paramilitary. Of course, that's not to say the police are nice guys. I mean, on the whole, there's a lot of nasty police as well. But it's interesting the way that some of these police units have cracked. And I think it is ultimately not out of the question that if it came down to a complete implosion and Min Aung Hlaing, the senior general who is in charge of the junta, really gave the order to get out on the streets and mow down crowds, he could risk some kind of crack or split in the military. And you know, I've said this because we were both there in 1986 on EDSA.
Yes, please, Gwen, talk to us about, because you covered EDSA in 1986 and now you're seeing this happen in Myanmar. Is there any comparison?
Well, not much, but I'd like to think, and I've got colleagues here, including a military expert who is the Jane's defense correspondent, who poo-poo the idea that maybe there could be some kind of, you know, ideally a counter coup, but I would say that it's not inconceivable that some military men are extremely uncomfortable with where this is heading. They all know in the back of their minds that they might be asked to go out there and shoot unarmed civilians, and a lot of them are very young. And there's even, as you probably have seen in footage, grannies, or they're not just angry young men out there. So, you know, I think it's also causing some disquiet in the upper ranks. There was great speculation a couple of weeks ago that a couple of the generals closest to Min Aung Hlaing had dissented and were being shoved out of the junta. I don't think that, I last saw photographs, they were both in the group, the State Administration Council, which is the junta. They're still there, but it's not, I don't think it's out of the question. There would be, whether it would be I think a counter coup is almost impossible because of the way how controlled the whole system is and commanders and the chain of command. It would be very, very difficult for any lone colonel with a conscience to bring his unit in. In the Philippines, we saw how it only took, there was those wavering moments on EDSA. There was young soldiers driving tanks, surrounded by crowds, pleading them not to move. There was whole units that turned, and it only took a few of those, and the whole military turned, which was extraordinary. But I'm sad to say I can't see it happening really wholesale in Myanmar.
But do the generals care about what the international community thinks about it? And the pressure? Is there pressure from the major investors like Japan, China, Singapore? You said, I think you wrote about this, that the international community should engage with the generals in order to pressure them or influence them. Can you talk to us about this, Gwen?
Yeah, well, you asked two questions really, which was, don't the generals care about the international community? And second is, what about pressure from big business? And I think you mentioned countries.
Investors, yes.
Well, I think the generals really care about international, their international image in a strange way. They don't care enough not to be seen shooting people on the streets, but they moved immediately after the coup to reassure investors. They're giving daily briefings. They're sending these extraordinary long documents every day out to embassies and governments and international organizations, updating people every day on decisions taken by the junta, their ideas for reform. These are, 20 pages or more coming out every day. So they're clearly still trying to convince people that, that they've got the reformist agenda in mind, and, they're doing things. But, also this is so Myanmar military. I mean, they include ridiculous things like last week, one of the memos for the day included Min Aung Hlaing's decision to build an 81-foot marble statue of Buddha in Naypyidaw, which is probably about the very last thing Myanmar needs right now, and can't afford anyway. So you're getting sort of weird things mixed up, like important decisions about investment regulations or some economic reform policy, and then you're getting these sort of pronouncements about monuments. You're also getting some pretty tough threats about the protest movement, and constant reminders that they are absolutely determined to stamp it out. So most recently, I think there was a warning that protesters could lose their lives if they continued protesting. So to me, that was the most chilling threat of all. But business pressure, well, there's two things, and it links to the sanctions debate. I think the world is debating how far to take sanctions. No one disputes that some actions have to be taken to put the junta on notice. And these have been led by the US with targeted sanctions that named individual generals, mainly generals connected to the junta, and also named a few companies. That was only 3 companies in the first instance, but these are mechanisms that easily enable adding companies and people as they go along. It's all been set up under executive order. There are a raft of other US agencies and bodies, including Congress, as well as other departments of the US government, which can take their own measures. So right now, the question is, do you push sanctions further and penalize? Basically, they're going to hit the poor people, really, especially sanctions like the things that affect the export trade, really, trade sanctions that really deal with Myanmar's exports, which really, as we all know, are the mainstay of the country, provide jobs, employment, and keep things ticking over. And last time this happened, US sanctions in 2003, early 2000s, they resulted in terrible job losses, particularly in the garment industry, which is primarily young women. So this now, Myanmar has come so much further and has thriving industries, manufacturing, seafood processing, lots of agricultural exports, and a nascent tech sector as well. There's so many things now to lose, and I think economic sanctions should be, broad economic sanctions should be amongst the last things there's still a long way to go to target specifics and specific companies. In terms of companies altogether, we saw some action by foreign companies, including some of the biggest joint ventures. Japan, famously, Kirin Holdings of Japan announced within days of the coup that it was withdrawing from a joint venture with Myanmar's military conglomerate called MEHL in brewing beer, which is one of the biggest companies and most successful in Myanmar. So Kirin announced its withdrawal. That was followed by Singaporean investor, Thai investors suspended a project for an industrial park. The Koreans have announced the withdrawal of a couple of projects with the military. I think the next phase we're seeing just now is companies really, some companies announcing they're suspending, nothing to do with the military. They're just doing business in Myanmar, but they're going to suspend it. And that has more to do with concerns about security and safety of staff, and also this deep concern about the junta and its next moves concerning economy, finance, business. I think that one of the ones that really shook business confidence and was rather foolish of the junta to do was announce these very draconian cyber laws, where it laid out, it said this draft bill was for consultation and notified everyone that there would be some very, very strict internet censorship laws coming in, and that included forcing internet providers to make available access to all data. And for companies, you know, this is untenable. And that shows a certain naivety on the part of the junta that they thought they could get away with this and possibly keep investor confidence. The other point to make on investor confidence is I think it's starting to turn now. For 1 month, we've seen companies mainly fence sitting, hoping it'll get better, not wanting to ditch their investments. You know, it's been a terribly hard time for all people in Myanmar, but companies in particular under COVID were forced to close. They were struggling to support staff amongst those who didn't want to just dismiss staff. So they paid out a lot. They've made no money, and they were just gearing up to go back to business when the coup happened. So I think many are thinking this is the last straw. So I think from now we'll see a wave of possible bankruptcies, closures, and amongst foreign companies, I think possible withdrawal.
So, Gwen, do you see a compromise with the NLD? I mean, what's the way to calm down all this, you know, to return to, can they talk to each other? Is there mediation going on? Like this Indonesian foreign minister met with his counterpart in Bangkok, right? And with the Thai minister. So can we expect anything, middle way or a middle ground?
Yeah, you do ask difficult questions.
No, this is the last one, Gwen, because we're nearing.
Okay. No, well, plenty to say on that. I'll try and keep it short. Yes, the Indonesian Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi popped up in Bangkok last week, and you know, in an amazing move, the Thais let I won't call him a foreign minister. I'll call him the junta's spokesman for military foreign affairs, came to Bangkok, and amazingly, he also met PM Prayut, the Prime Minister of Thailand. But there was a three-way between the Thais, Myanmar, and Indonesia about where to take it forward with ASEAN. There is a special ASEAN foreign ministers meeting tomorrow, also to discuss this very issue. We could have another whole session on the implications for ASEAN, but basically, to cut it short, ASEAN is absolutely, they so did not want to see this, and they know that it is a severe hit on their own credibility. ASEAN has no ability to expel a member. It can maybe persuade a member to go away for a while, but basically they have a very, very set agenda of summits, including with their partner countries. So we're talking about the US, Japan, Korea, I think more than a dozen countries are ASEAN's partner. And also they have summits of foreign ministers, defense ministers, and so on. So does ASEAN really want to see a pariah country sitting in its midst? I would say most definitely not. Does ASEAN want to see Myanmar implode and become a failed state, particularly on the borders of some of the key members? No, of course it doesn't. What's the solution? I mean, your guess is as good as mine, but I would say there's only a few options, and one is to try and force or broker some kind of compromise. Personally, I think that's out of the question with the current NLD regime. That's the National League for Democracy, headed by Aung San Suu Kyi, who has the role of state councillor in the government, and I will call it a government. And she is still tremendously influential. So I don't think any compromise deal could be brokered if she opposes it. She's almost certain to. I think another possible thing is that the junta may offer her freedom. She's currently detained and is to appear in court again tomorrow on these absurd charges of illegal importation of walkie-talkies and a couple of other minor charges. But she will almost certainly refuse any offer of free passage out of the country. And similarly, if ASEAN tried to broker a deal where the two protagonists are really Aung San Suu Kyi and Min Aung Hlaing, he is the person who controls the whole military, and the coup was basically his instigation. It's not even like a kind of council, really. It's a lot of it is from him. I cannot see him agreeing to go into exile and give up. And one thing we do know about the military in Myanmar, they have tremendously enhanced sense of face. And that the last thing, even if this comes to complete grief and the country implodes, I don't think you'll see the generals admitting they were wrong and agreeing to step down. What could happen next? I think obviously it has to include a face-saving solution for the military. And even if you could imagine a post-coup environment, I don't think you can have a country that does not have a military at all. So you're not talking about getting rid of the military. You could get rid of the commander, but then that really does require him stepping down or being spirited away, taken out Bin Laden style, if there was a country or willing to do it. And there are questions about Aung San Suu Kyi. This was clearly going to be her last term. Her party won 83% of the popular vote, 82% perhaps. And but now she's getting older and she's given it her best shot, and she's now locked up. She may, in her mind, feel she wants to come back. But I think also momentum is moving to a newer and younger generation. So that also has to be thought about. And maybe there are people more willing to compromise. In the NLD, the question is, would it ever come to that? And would they be able to take charge? The one thing I'd like to say before ending is that I think the emergence of this CRPH, the Committee to Represent the P'yadang Su Luthor, which is the Burmese word for parliament, is probably at this point the only body in Myanmar that could speak broadly for the protest movement. The protest movement is faceless. It doesn't have a central command. But this CRPH, which is made up of only a handful of the MPs who won in last November's election, is providing some kind of action and has made contact with the UN. And we did see the stunning denunciation in the UN General Assembly on Friday of Myanmar's ambassador to the UN of the coup. He has been dismissed. That leaves a huge question over in the diplomatic respect over Myanmar's status at the UN. The junta will almost certainly be proposing an ambassador to replace Cho Tun, who is the ambassador who denounced the coup. Will the UN accept? I think the ball is in their court on that. But meanwhile, the CRPH, the committee, has set up an office in America, in Maryland, and is trying to negotiate with not just the UN, but international organizations, governments. And up to now, I think there have been some very positive signs that the UN Special Representative to Myanmar for the Secretary General, Christine Schreiner-Bergener, also endorsed the CRPH on Friday at that same UN General Assembly session. So if the world decided to engage with this small body of, it began with 15 MPs, maybe there's 20 now, but I think it's growing very, very quickly and could possibly become at least a vehicle for liaising with the opposition, or not the opposition, sorry, the protest movement.
Very fascinating, Gwen. Thank you so much. Now we will keep watching what will happen. So that's the CRPH is a very interesting body of 15 to 20 members of parliament, right?
Well, I don't know. Actually, you'd have to check. I haven't checked in the last 24 hours, but
at least there's something moving in the international.
There's something moving, and they've appointed envoys to liaise with the international community and a representative to the UN, Dr. Sasa. So this is really one to watch, I think. Obviously, the military is very hostile to this notion. So I think, though, that the next thing to watch is to see what the UN will do. I mean, no matter whether you think the UN is powerless to do anything, I think recognition, and it is what the junta craves. They really crave the recognition. And it is only maybe just dawning on them that they're not going to get it. That will make them even more dangerous if they feel there's nothing to lose. Up to recently, they felt they had things to gain, which was convincing the international community to take them seriously. So let's keep watching.
Thank you so much, Gwen. At least we're ending on a slight note of hope about some negotiation going on. And thank you so much. And to our viewers and our listeners, we will keep watching what's going to happen in Myanmar. And good day, and wherever you are in the world. Bye, Gwen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.